Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kelly, thank you very much for your service and particularly for your service here today with this very lengthy testimony. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you. True public servant. I represent Florida's, America's first coast, Northeast Florida, Port of Jacksonville. And one of the concerns that I have is as the administration strengthens the southern land border, the security there, that the drug cartels will again shift their operations back to the maritime domain. Can you talk briefly about your experience at Southcom, and you know all too well the difficulties of interdiction, particularly with now the Navy sort of pulling out of that role. Can you speak briefly about any intentions that you may have to also strengthen at the same time our maritime security?
My information is a little dated, but I think it's still accurate. While we can see the flow of drugs, particularly cocaine as it comes up from South America, with a very, very high degree of clarity, primarily because of an organization in Key West, the Joint Interagency Task Force, that really leverages the entire U.S. interagency. And like most organizations that are far from Washington, D.C., it works better than if it was here, because people actually talk to each other. You know, DEA and FBI and Homeland Security, everyone is in the same fight. So the point is, we have a great deal of clarity. The vast majority of the drugs we know are moving up the Central American Isthmus into Mexico, as we all know, and into the United States. There, it's not really, as I testified many times in Homeland when I was in Southcom, it's not even really a speed bump. It gets in. The network is so well developed, it's so efficient, and it'll move anything, drugs, people, counterfeit industrial items, whatever. But we did start to see, and I'm going back a year ago now, we did start to see more flow coming up the island chain, the old cocaine cowboy days, if you will. Mostly flights out of Venezuela up to trying to get to places like Dominican Republic or even Puerto Rico. We started to react to that. But simply put, we don't have enough assets. I don't believe, with the exception of transit, there's been a U.S. Navy ship. Certainly, in the last 2 years of my time at Miami, we didn't have a single Navy ship. The good news is the United States Coast Guard, our fifth military service, kind of doubled the number of cutters, but that was like 4. So we don't have enough to monitor the flow. We have enough, we can monitor the flow, we don't have enough to interdict the flow. And remember, when we interdict down there in Southcom, we're getting it a ton at a time, 2 tons. Some of the submersibles, 8 or 10 tons at a time. As we have success on the southwest border, and there's no doubt we will, we're going to start to see it flow up towards it'll go back up the old island chain. The good news is Dominican Republic is a great ally in this whole effort. Many of the smaller island nations are great allies in this effort, but they will adjust to it, which goes back to the demand issue. If we simply reduce the demand significantly, like we have on other items and other things in the past, we would really, really cut into their profits. And it's, even if we don't care about the 47,000 Americans that died last year from these drugs, the $250 billion it costs the American taxpayer to deal with these drugs, even if we don't care about that, it's the profits that come out and cause death and destruction all over the Western Hemisphere, and frankly, some of that money is drawn off into radical Islam organizations. Long answer, sorry.
No, that's very good. Thank you, General. Also, Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the Coast Guard cutters. Will you continue to support the recapitalization of those cutters in the plan going forward now?
If I didn't say yes to that, the Coast Guard Commandant had come in here and hit me with a bat. But yes, absolutely. Their equipment is very, very, very old. They're a phenomenal group of men and women. They're in the fight every day in terms of not only saving lives but crime fighting. We have to recapitalize the organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.